So we have a little bit to set up on my MacBook Air. Just as a little bit of background, I've been a clinical psychologist for about 30 years. I specialise in anxiety disorders, but I'm also an early adopter of technologies. My profession in general are slow adopters. Many are still writing out invoices by hand. Most do not back up their data. Most haven't got a clue what the cloud is. So I'm in a breed or a category of my own here. Occasionally teach presentation skills, so hopefully I won't embarrass myself tonight. I'm just going to change something and move this over, if I can, to the screen. Something's going to slide over. Good. And now we're going to go to my presentation software. Good. And get that going. All right. So I engaged in VR starting when some of you were still in primary school in 2001. That's how long I've been doing VR for. So as proof of concept, I'm going to show you a television news article. TV loves VR when it comes to psychology because it's visual. It's very visual. So I'm going to show you Joe Hall from Channel 9 News and me 17 years ago on Channel 9. Let's have a look. There she is.
Ahead, an early morning emergency at a metropolitan service station. And the virtual way to confront your fears. For the thousands of Australians living with phobias, treatment is often a long and difficult process. But now, state-of-the-art technology is helping people confront their fears. More from Matt Dowling.
Ian Collins' fear of flying was once so bad he didn't board a plane for 14 years. Now he returns to the skies from the security of a psychologist's office.
Ian, you're in the cabin now of our 737.
Les Posen is using virtual reality therapy to help people conquer their phobias, putting the client in the situation, in Ian's case, on board an aircraft where anxiety sometimes takes over. The seats are equipped to simulate every situation, from takeoff to mid-air turbulence.
The most important thing with any sort of virtual therapy is to leave people long enough in the environment so they experience a reduction of their anxiety. And I've got complete control over that environment.
Ian admits it was unpleasantly realistic.
The bumps and bangs of the wheels, the noise of the engines and the actual vibration in the seat here are all, you think you're on a plane.
This technology can also be used by people who fear heights, storms and public speaking, where the audience response can range from appreciative, thank you very much, to downright hostile.
Get off, you're
Matt Dowling, National 9 News.
Anthony Mithen joins me now with sport.
Yeah, thanks. Good. So that's 2001. That was the technology that I was using. I actually had my VFX 3D here. Rick, can you reach into that bag there, take that part out, and then open up the Travel Pro? Who's not ever seen a VFX 3D in real life? Yeah, that one. No, you have to reach into the bag. Here, actually unzip it. Unzip it. Yep. It's old technology. You have to unzip things here.
Can I just ask it to open?
Yeah. Siri, open up Travel Pro.
Where's your zip?
Yeah, as the actress said, no, it doesn't matter. So here it is. This is the VFX 3D. 640 by 480 per little unit there. Built-in headphones. I think even the Oculus didn't start with built-in headphones, did it? And heavy. And it was, of course, fixed. It operated off a Windows XP box, a bit like Oculus again, only restricted to Windows. And it was the most beautiful Windows XP box you've ever seen because it never connected to the internet. Never. Not a virus, nothing, because everything that I installed and updated was totally on CD-ROM. And every 6 months, the developers at the university, in Emory University in Georgia, would send me updates. Okay? So at the time I got that, I had just finished with this airline Some of you will remember this airline. This airline finished in 2001 in October, the same month that the iPod was released. That's how far back we're going. And I was its fear of flying psychologist. And when it closed down, the opportunity to get people on board stationary aircraft, and of course after 9/11, into flight decks stopped. And so the ability to simulate experiences on board the plane changed, and so VR presented itself at just the right time. One of my colleagues in the United States who also got involved with this and applied VR was this guy, Skip Rizzo. So if you want to know about VR and psychology, this is numero uno. This is your top bloke. Okay? Skip receives millions of dollars per year from the Department of Defense in the US to develop PTSD scenarios to help returning veterans, and at the same time develop VR scenarios to train people to deal with going into war. So you throw them into war and then you try and repair them afterwards using VR. Go figure. So that's Skip. And this is Skip, if I can do this properly. Let's have a look. There's Skip using the Oculus. So he used the same VFX that I did to start with, and then he switched over to Oculus. Why did he switch over to Oculus? Who was the primary developer of Oculus? Palmer. Wow. Palmer Luckey. Palmer Luckey was the young man at the age of 25 who sold Oculus to Facebook for how much? $2.5 billion. And Palmer did his internship with Skip. And so the Oculus and this next wave of VR owes itself to this. That's where it started from, this modern, shall we call it the third wave of VR, with the Oculus and the HTC Vive. And so we now have these developments from Skip and others using hyper-realistic VR scenarios, actually off-the-shelf games, rather than developed ones, because there's huge amounts of money being poured into games. But this idea of trying to fool the eye using VR so we get clinical effects is nothing new. This form of art, known as trompe-l'oeil, which means to trick the eye, literally to trick the eye, started off in what year? Who would like to take a guess? When was this painting made? 1690. So, not a bad guess. It says up there, well, that's very good. But notice what the effort is to make something that's 2D look like 3D. And the early artists understood how this works by certain principles of depth perception, things that overlay each other, things that have shadows, things that are very important if you want to create a VR environment that has immersive properties. You have to understand depth perception and how the brain works. Okay? 1690s, it just about is around the same time that optics was used, how people were able to take sand and create optics. About the same time. And of course, people have been using VR to fool the eye for a long time. These are anamorphic illustrations. But like bad VR, if you stand in the wrong place, it's all revealed to you. You have to stand in the one place to get that effect. So bad VR doesn't take into account how the brain works and how visual perception works to start with. You've got to remember that the brain, about 60% of brain real estate is devoted to visual perception. Okay, that's very important. In my hairy dog at home, about 60% of his brain is devoted to smell, smelling things. For us, smell is right down the list. Visual perception is very important. So coming to the 1940s, and Walt Disney understood perception and depth and how important it was. And he solved a big problem using a new form of camera.
The trouble was we were photographing a flat two-dimensional background. So we set about making plans and blueprints for a new cartoon camera that would overcome this. The different elements in the scene were separated according to their varying distances from the viewer. This put the moon on a plane farthest away from the camera. With our original picture broken down in this manner, it is possible to control the relative speed with which each individual part of it moves to or away from the camera. But the moon remains absolutely still, and so it will always remain the same, neither growing nor shrinking in size. Of course, our cartoon camera does not shoot sideways, but is placed above and shoots downward toward the drawing. Since this new camera used many planes, we called it the multiplane camera. And here now is our same moonlight scene the way the multiplane camera sees it. As you can see, we finally got the moon to keep its proper distance.
So people have been thinking about how to fool the eye in all sorts of ways for a long, long time. Way before we had 3D and Avatar and Wonder Woman. Who's seen Wonder Woman in 3D? You don't need to. 2D would be fine. So when we apply this sort of technology and this sort of thinking to clinical psychology, I like to apply to anxiety. The anxiety disorders are twice as prevalent as depressive disorders, the mood disorders. We think that about 25% of the population will experience some sort of anxiety disorder, not just an occasional frisson of displeasure and discomfort, but a significantly intrusive anxiety episode in their lives, whether it be public speaking, going to elevators, going through bridges, going over bridges, through tunnels, and doing what I'm doing, public speaking, as well as flying and all sorts of things in the course of their lifetime. So it's a large population. It's a significant one. When it comes to fear of flying, we think that 1 in 6 to 1 in 12 of the general population could be flying more often, and they choose not to. And I've met a number of CEOs whose businesses are so happy that they've got the latest in video conferencing and the latest in other forms of conferencing, mainly because the CEO refuses to fly around the country. So that's been very helpful for them. So let's talk a little bit about anxiety, and you have to understand the biology of anxiety just a wee bit. So let's have a look at this. That yellow part down the bottom there, the very bottom yellow part, is called the brainstem. It's the earliest part of our evolution. We have this in common with reptiles, and it's responsible for things like heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, digestion. Things that happen without you having to think about them. In fact, the less you think about them, the better. You don't want to go to bed at night hoping and praying that your heart keeps beating and your lungs keep respiring. Okay, so it's set and forget stuff. If we move, oh, by the way, with that, most people who experience anxiety will tell me that the very symptoms they experience, which they find uncomfortable, heart rate increasing, palpitations, breaking out of sweat, are all responsive to that brainstem. So the very things that most upset us are the things that are under our least voluntary control. This is very important. Okay? If we move up one level, I've moved up 2 levels. There we go. If we move up 1 level, we get to the midbrain, this mammalian section called the limbic system. This is where we experience our emotions: fear, anger, love, and so forth and so on. Midsection of the brain. And this is where the threat response system kicks in. What was that noise? Did he move? Is he making a dangerous move towards me? So if I focus for a moment on fear of flying, one of the things that people experience is strange noises, strange motions, things that they can't explain for themselves, that are mysterious. So in general, with the anxiety disorders, people either overestimate the presence of danger, and/or they underestimate their ability to cope with their own experiences. Does that make sense if I explain it that way? Overestimation of danger, underestimation of their own ability to cope. And the way that we work with VR is to use a very standard form of what's called exposure therapy. Exposure therapy is simply this: the longer you stay in your scary situation and not escape and experience relief, the more in and of itself your levels of arousal will come down by themselves, the longer you stay in your scary situation. The difficulty is that most people leave their scary situations far too early and experience relief. Relief is not just a thought, it's a physical sensation, a series of physical sensations returning you to normality, so to speak. And people go, oh, thank God I'm out of there. What ends up happening is that when you experience that relief, it actually reinforces that the thing I escaped from must by definition be dangerous. So people go from, I used to enjoy flying, to I could take it or leave it, to now I don't want to fly ever again. Does that make sense? That's how people engineer themselves into this. So the right way to do training is to expose people to their scary situations so they get used to it, and then you add one, that's called habituation. Then you add one more thing, And the one more thing which I think is important is know what to do about it. It's not good enough just to stay in there. You want to know what to do compared to what you ordinarily do, which for most people, let's just say with turbulence, is to grip the seats. Worst thing you can do. Or hold your breath. Or say, I wish I was out of here. Or say, I'm trapped. I need to be somewhere else. Of course, at 35,000 feet, at minus 52 degrees outside, there's nowhere to go. So it enhances the sense of entrapment. So where VR comes in handy is that I can do multiple takeoffs throughout a session. And I can't do that in real life. Very hard in a 1 hour session to do more than 4 takeoffs, and it's very expensive. But in VR, I can do multiple takeoffs. And so what I usually do is say to the person at the very beginning, we're just going to do a takeoff. I'm not going to ask you to do anything. Let's just see how it works. And what I'm really looking for is the VR immersive enough for them to feel as if I can feel a trigger going on. Now, what I actually also do is I measure heart rate and skin response. These are very good indicators of what's going on, okay? So you want to be able to do that rather than just simply saying to someone, well, how are you feeling? Because people often misinterpret their own bodily signals. You want an objective measure, so they can see that will change from session to session. Then we might do a second takeoff, and this may sound paradoxical to you, but I'll try and get them to make it the worst possible takeoff they can do. I want them to bring on their worst fear. Okay, and I'll explain that in a moment. So what might I get them to do during that takeoff? Well, clearly grip the seats, hold their breath, and what sort of thoughts might I get them to encourage themselves, to say to themselves, what am I doing here? This is terrible. I shouldn't be here. Why did I accept this journey? And they will physically feel how bad the flight is, even though they know at some other logical level, nothing's changed. It's exactly the same presentation as it was the first time. And what they get to see is it's me who brings on these yucky sensations and these fearful experiences. Does that make sense? Then we do a third one. And the third one is where I teach them how to breathe, how to hold themselves, and appropriate cognitive strategies, what we call cognitive restructuring. So they go from just a first, let's just see what happens, to the second, the worst possible, and then the third, which is the better one. And they get to see just how much they contribute to their own experience. That's called taking back control. Does that work for you as an idea? And that might require several sessions to do that. So they need cognitive strategies, what to think. They need behavioural strategies, what to do. And they need physiological strategies, which is to reset that limbic system that you can see here to switch down the threat response. So rather than having false positives or false alarms, they can have a much more accurate appreciation of what's going on. Okay? What are those noises, what are those sounds, what are those moves? So let me show you what that looks like. So this is the software that I'm now using. So I got rid of the other one because the VFX no longer was supported. And so now we have a system where we have the Gear VR. This is the white one, there's a black one, and these are the only Samsung products I own. The Samsung 7, I bought it only to put into the Gear VR, and it's never gone to the 4G network. It only goes over the internet. So you hook up the Mac, and this is the other difference. It works with Mac. As long as you've got a website, it will work, a web connection. So I can actually go out to the airport, go on board a stationary plane. I have a relationship with Qantas, be on board a plane with a Gear VR to enhance that sense of immersion and practice takeoffs on a stationary plane, just to go to that next level, which is important for some people, or just walk down the jetway. So we have a variety of environments. If I say the word environments, you know what I'm talking about. Environments. Fear of flying, fear of needles. I see a number of people with blood injury phobias. And so we can do that. And you've got on the left-hand side, agoraphobia, animals. That's actually using AR, using a business card. Put the business card in someone's hand, hold the phone over it, and there's a cockroach or a spider in their hand. Neat, huh? Fear of driving. Now, each of these have modules within. So the fear of driving can be, we can drive through a tunnel, we can drive over a bridge, we can make it rainy, we can make it sunny, and I can change the environment. I can make it crowded or it's just us on the road. And we can work our way up through what's called a hierarchy of exposure. Does that work as an idea for you? And it's the same with the fear of flying. We start off in a hotel room if we want to, packing, but the television's on, it says it's going to be really rainy today and expect thunderstorms. And this is where it can start for some people. Then they drive to the airport, they check in, we can actually walk down the jetway. And this is where I get people to stand up and walk on the spot. If people sit, but their avatar is walking, guess what they experience? Nausea, called cyber sickness. When there's a clash between the senses in my body are saying I'm sitting, but my visual sense says I'm in motion. When there's a clash between your sensory data, you'll get nauseous, which says, get me the hell out of here. That's what nausea is about. Get me the hell out or make me lie down, whichever it might be. People feel faint, okay? So that's how that works. We've got a fear of driving, public speaking. There are several of these. By the way, I'm personally in some of these. This is a Spanish company. I've had a relationship with them where I've been advising them. I went into a friend has a 3D environment where in a room half this size, 60 or 80 Nikon cameras. He goes, click, they all take a picture, develops into one 25 meg file. I send it off to Spain where this stuff is, and they put me in the environments. And it's not a bad similarity, or what's called in the trade verisimilitude. If I scroll up a little bit, if I can, I'll show you some of the other ones. Don't know if I can get this to work. Will I face backwards? No, doesn't matter. So we have some other, we also have some nice relaxing environments, walking on a beach and so forth. But again, the most important principle is keep people, where possible, in their scary situations long enough so they experience a diminution in arousal, and then teach them what to do differently in terms of their thoughts, their sensations and their behaviours. That's the principle in which we work. Now later on, things are going to change a bit. So I'm going to show you one more little thing, which I hope you'll enjoy, and some of you may have seen in the past. So we're going to have a look at augmented reality. And so I'm starting to do this now using green screen. How many of you have got a green screen set up somewhere at home or in your offices? Yes, green screen. So the idea with green screen is some form of mixed reality where the person can see themselves using a headset or just staring at a monitor in their feared situation. So I've used this with young children with dog phobia, very prevalent amongst young children, dog phobia. So I've got a video of dogs at dog training coming up to me in the camera, and the person standing there, and I can actually put them in that scenario so they can see themselves around the dogs. Part of them knows I'm not with dogs, but part of them sees themselves with dogs. You start to chip away at that belief that I can't stand being around dogs. Does that work for you as an idea? Yeah. So let me show you this BBC One. Museums are some of the earliest adopters of this sort of new technologies. Because it ends in "eum", we tend to think these are old things like Colosseum and Mausoleum, but museums are some of the latest technology users. So this is the Bristol Museum, which you may have seen, Museum of Natural History, using augmented reality, and this is where I think my field is going to go more than VR, using augmented reality. So when we're talking about where Apple's going with AR come September, October, when the iPhone 8 comes out, I'm very excited about where that's going to take me clinically. So let me just quickly show you this video, and hopefully you'll get it straight away.
I see a polar bear and a penguin.
So what are they looking at? What are they seeing?
I like the killer whale. I like the penguin. The polar bear running after us.
So this is very
Well,
exciting.
I think this is amazing as it stands at the moment, but perhaps going into the...
So I talked before about emotion. Emotion is the property of the hardware and the visuals to create a zone of what we call in the trade verisimilitude. It looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, quacks like a duck, must be a duck. And you join up the dots very quickly. So that's emotion, the ability of the hardware to say, yeah, that's acting like it's supposed to. But that's not sufficient for a great VR experience. You need something else called presence, which is where I can act on the environment and it acts according to the way I want it to. It's my subjective experience of that emotion. And that's what that part was about, their ability to interact with their augmented reality stuff. So that's where I'm going with my VR stuff. That's the next part, having patients interact with the environment around them and experience things that ordinarily would be very hard to set up. And rather challenging to set up, and this is where I'm going to go with this next.